The Boston Massacre didn't just stain the snow with blood, it lit the fuse of revolution. Welcome back everyone to Hidden History Stories. In today's episode, we're uncovering the true story of Paul Revere, the silversmith who became a spy, a messenger, the silversmith who became a spy, a messenger, and the rider whose midnight dash helped ignite America's fight for independence. From his engraving of the Boston Massacre to his daring escape from British patrols, Revere's story is far more thrilling and far more dangerous than the legend you've heard. Every story from the past holds a lesson, and this one shows how ordinary citizens can change the course of history. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and share it with anyone who loves exploring the past. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's begin. Picture this. It's March 1770, and the sound echoing through Boston's narrow streets isn't church bells or merchant calls. It's the steady ring of a hammer against silver, and it's about to help spark a revolution. Paul Revere works at his anvil, shaping a tea service in his North End workshop. Through his window on Fish Street, British soldiers march past like clockwork. The locals call them lobsterbacks, and they're about to give Paul all the reason he needs to hate them. At 35, Paul is already Boston's most celebrated silversmith. His shop bears the sign of a silver teapot, and wealthy merchants line up for his exquisite work. Even loyalist families, those still loyal to the crown, commission pieces from his skilled hands. But here's what would shock those Tory customers. Paul Revere is already deep in the resistance movement. While crafting their silver, he's plotting their downfall. Suddenly, shouting erupts from King Street. Paul sets down his hammer and steps outside. Neighbors are running toward the commotion, and the shouts are getting louder, more urgent. As he hurries through the narrow cobblestone streets, Paul has no idea he's about to witness the event that will change everything. "They fired on citizens," someone screams. "The soldiers have murdered innocent people." Paul reaches King Street and sees a scene that will haunt him forever. 5 colonists lie dead or dying in the snow. Their blood stains the white ground crimson. British soldiers stand in formation, muskets still smoking, while Captain Thomas Preston tries to restore order. But what Paul does next will be far more dangerous than any musket. "Murderers?" someone shouts from the angry crowd. "Bloody murderers." Paul's mind races as he surveys the carnage. This is exactly what the resistance needs, but only if word spreads quickly and accurately. He pushes through the crowd, memorizing every detail. The position of the bodies, the expressions on the soldiers' faces, every witness account. He's not just observing history, he's about to create it. Within hours, Paul is back in his workshop, but he's not crafting silver anymore. Instead, he's creating something far more powerful, an engraving that will spread the story of the Boston Massacre throughout the colonies. Working by candlelight, he carefully etches the scene into a copper plate. Every line captures the drama and horror. This isn't just art, it's warfare. His engraving shows British soldiers firing in unison into peaceful citizens. Captain Preston clearly orders the attack. It's propaganda, certainly emphasizing British aggression while downplaying colonial provocation. But here's the thing, it works. When printed and distributed, Revere's engraving becomes one of the most influential pieces of revolutionary literature. It turns local anger into colonial outrage. One image, one silversmith. One step closer to war. But Paul's real importance isn't his artistic talent. It's his role as a messenger and intelligence operative. His silversmith business provides perfect cover for traveling throughout New England. British authorities see only a craftsman delivering goods to customers. They never suspect he's actually coordinating resistance activities. The perfect spy, hiding in plain sight. Between 1770 and 1775, Paul develops into Boston's most effective secret agent. He belongs to multiple patriot organizations, the Sons of Liberty, the North End Caucus, and most secretly, a surveillance group monitoring British military activities. His network stretches from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to New York City. But what they're about to discover will change everything. By late 1774, tension has reached a breaking point. The Boston Tea Party, which Paul helped orchestrate, led to the intolerable acts. Massachusetts is now under military rule. General Thomas Gage commands 4,000 British troops in Boston. Paul's intelligence network has discovered something terrifying. Gage is planning to seize colonial weapons and arrest patriot leaders. The question isn't if he'll strike, it's when. Paul's surveillance network identifies the likely targets: military supplies stored in Concord, and Samuel Adams and John Hancock hiding in Lexington. These are the crown jewels of the resistance. The Patriots need advance warning if Gage moves. But here's the problem. How do you get word out of a city under military siege? Paul has a plan, and it's brilliant. Picture this elegant solution. Paul arranges with Robert Newman, sexton of Old North Church, to use the church's tall steeple as a signal tower. If British troops move by land across Boston Neck, Newman hangs one lantern in the belfry. If they cross the harbor by boat, 2 lanterns. Simple, effective, revolutionary. 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Paul explains to his fellow conspirators. The signal will alert patriots in Charlestown who can dispatch riders to warn the countryside. It's a communications network that would make modern intelligence agencies proud. But Paul knows signals can fail. What happens next will require him to risk everything. April 18, 1775. The night begins quietly enough. Paul works late in his shop, supposedly finishing a commission. In reality, he's waiting for word from his watchers. Around 10 o'clock, his contact arrives with urgent news, and Paul's pulse quickens. British troops are gathering at the Common, the man whispers. Full battle gear. They're loading into boats at the foot of the Common. This is it. Gage is finally making his move. The British are crossing the harbour, which means the target is Concord. Paul sends word immediately to Newman at Old North Church. 2 lanterns. But here's what makes Paul Revere a true hero. He can't rely solely on the signal. Too much depends on this warning. Paul needs to ride himself, carrying the message directly. The problem? Getting out of Boston. The city is under siege, with British patrols guarding every exit. But Paul anticipated this. He's arranged for Joshua Bentley, a fisherman, to row him across the harbour to Charlestown. What could go wrong? Actually, quite a lot. As they push off from the North End shore, Paul realizes they've forgotten something crucial. The boat's oars are wrapped in cloth to muffle sound, but they'll still create noise that might alert British sentries. Thinking quickly, Paul asks Bentley if they have any additional fabric. "My sweetheart gave me her flannel petticoat," Bentley grins. "Said it would bring me luck." The irony isn't lost on Paul. A woman's undergarment is about to help facilitate one of the most important missions of the Revolution. They wrap the flannel around the oars, creating nearly silent rowing. The crossing takes 20 nerve-wracking minutes. British warships lie anchored nearby, their sentries scanning the dark water. Paul and Bentley hug the shoreline, moving slowly to avoid creating wakes that might catch moonlight. One wrong move, one suspicious sound, and the mission ends in failure. But they make it across. When they finally reach Charlestown, Patriot leaders are waiting with a horse. Deacon Larkin's mare, Brown Beauty. Paul mounts quickly and spurs the horse toward Lexington. He's now racing against time and British troops. And what happens next will become the stuff of legend. Here's what really happened during Paul Revere's midnight ride. and it's more complex and dangerous than the legend suggests. Paul doesn't ride alone shouting, "The British are coming." That would make no sense. Everyone in Massachusetts still considers themselves British subjects. Instead, he rides from house to house, quietly warning Patriot leaders that the regulars are coming out. Regular troops, military professionals coming to destroy them. At each stop, Paul's message sparks immediate action. Church bells begin ringing in the distance as local militias receive word to muster. Riders mount fresh horses to spread the alarm farther into the countryside. By dawn, a network of communication will activate that brings thousands of armed colonists converging on the route between Lexington and Concord. One man's ride is becoming a revolution. Paul reaches Lexington around midnight, finding Samuel Adams and John Hancock at Reverend Jonas Clark's parsonage. His warning gives them precious time to escape before British troops arrive. "Thank God you've come," Adams says as he gathers his papers. "How much time do we have?" "The troops left Boston around 11, Paul replies. "They'll be here by dawn if they make good time." But Paul's mission is far from over. Paul's mission should end there, but Adams convinces him to continue toward Concord with William Dawes, who took the land route, and Samuel Prescott, a local doctor. The three men ride together through the pre-dawn darkness, stopping at farmhouses to spread the alarm. They have no idea they're riding into a trap. Near Lincoln, their luck runs out. A British patrol has been posted to intercept messengers. The three riders find themselves surrounded by mounted soldiers with drawn pistols. "Stop! You are prisoners of the king," commands the British sergeant. Now here's where Paul Revere's night takes a terrifying turn. Prescott, knowing the local terrain, spurs his horse toward a stone wall and leaps it cleanly, escaping into the darkness. Dawes manages to break away during the confusion, though he's thrown from his horse. Paul isn't so fortunate. The British hold him at gunpoint while they debate what to do with their prisoner. Major Edward Mitchell recognizes Paul as a known agitator. But Paul is about to turn the tables in the most brilliant way possible. "You're Paul Revere, the silversmith," Mitchell says. "What's your business on the roads at this hour?" Paul makes a calculated decision. Rather than deny his identity, he'll use psychological warfare. What he says next is pure genius. "I was sent to alarm the countryside," he says boldly. "There are already 500 men gathering in Lexington and more coming from every direction. Your expedition is discovered and you're walking into a trap." This is a masterful bluff. Paul knows militia companies are mustering, but he has no idea of their actual numbers. His confident assertion plants seeds of doubt in the British officers' minds. The distant sound of church bells and signal guns seems to confirm Paul's words. The British patrol realizes their mission has been compromised. Continuing toward Lexington might mean walking into an ambush. Paul Revere, prisoner, has just terrified his captors. The British decide to return Paul to Lexington rather than continue toward Concord, hoping to use him as guide and hostage. But as they approach the town, the sound of musket fire erupts from the direction of the common. "What is that firing?" demands Major Mitchell. "The militia is engaging your advance guard," Paul replies with satisfaction. "I told you the countryside was alarmed. The worst is still to come." Realizing their position is becoming untenable, the British patrol releases Paul and rides hard back toward Boston. They captured the messenger but failed to prevent his message from reaching its destination. Paul walks into Lexington just as the sun is rising, arriving in time to witness the opening shots of the American Revolution. On Lexington Common, 77 militiamen face nearly 700 British regulars. The odds are hopeless, but what happens next will echo through history. "Stand your ground," Captain John Parker commands his men. "Don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here." Paul watches from the edge of the common as the two forces face each other across the dewy grass. The British commander, Major John Pitcairn, rides forward and shouts for the militia to disperse. This is the moment, the point of no return. Lay down your arms, you damned rebels, and disperse. For a moment, neither side moves. Then someone fires. Historians still debate whether it was a British soldier, a militiaman, or an accidental discharge. But that single shot unleashes a volley from British ranks that leaves 8 Americans dead and 10 wounded. There's no turning back now. The shot heard round the world has been fired. Paul spends the rest of that historic day coordinating communications between patriot groups as British forces march to Concord and back. By evening, what began as a routine military expedition has become a running battle stretching from Concord to Charlestown. Colonial militiamen harass British troops from behind stone walls, trees, and buildings. The hunters have become the hunted. When the battered British column finally reaches the safety of Charlestown, they've suffered 273 casualties compared to only 95 for the Americans. The message is crystal clear: colonial militias can stand against professional soldiers. The British Army is not invincible. Everything has changed. For Paul, April 19, 1775 marks the beginning of a new phase in his revolutionary activities. His midnight ride was successful beyond his wildest hopes. Not because he personally warned every village and farm, but because he triggered a communications network that activated the entire countryside. One Silversmith, one ride, one revolution. In the months that follow, Paul serves the patriot cause in many capacities. Messenger carrying dispatches to the Continental Congress, intelligence operative tracking British movements, manufacturer of gunpowder for the Continental Army. His diverse skills make him invaluable to the resistance, but his greatest contribution goes far deeper than any single skill. Here's what makes Paul Revere's story so powerful. He proves that the revolution belongs not just to wealthy merchants and educated lawyers. It belongs to craftsmen, farmers, and ordinary citizens willing to risk everything for liberty. Paul Revere, silversmith and patriot, helped light the fuse that would explode into American independence, and he was just getting started. Years later, when poets and historians celebrate his midnight ride, they sometimes get the details wrong. But the essential truth remains: when his country needed him, a Boston artisan answered the call. He rode through the darkness to warn his countrymen that their freedom was under attack. And in doing so, he became something more than a silversmith. He became an American. That willingness to act, to take personal risks for the common good, became part of the American character that Paul Revere helped forge on that cold April night in 1775. It's a character defined not by birth or wealth or education, but by courage, by the willingness to stand up when standing up matters most. The hammer that shaped Silver and Paul's workshop would ring again after the war, crafting beautiful pieces that bore the mark of a master artisan. But it had also shaped something far more precious: the spirit of American liberty. Forged in the crucible of revolution and tempered by the courage of ordinary people who refused to accept tyranny. Paul Revere's midnight ride became a symbol not just of one man's courage, but of a principle that freedom requires vigilance, that liberty demands action, that ordinary citizens possess extraordinary power when united by a common cause. The flame he helped kindle on that April night burns bright in the American spirit for generations to come. And it all started with a silversmith who heard his country calling. And that was the story of Paul Revere, the silversmith whose midnight ride carried the spark that would ignite a revolution. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss more hidden history stories. And I'd love to hear from you. What is your favorite historical era? Let me know in the comments below.